Hey, Freddie Wills here, back with another podcast. Want to apologize that I was unable to make last week's podcast. A lot going on at home. I was under the weather. My two kids were under the weather. They were staying home from daycare. So it was just a bit of a crazy week, but I'm back this week and very excited to say that we are coming off two of our best weeks ever. 56.4% return on investment over the last 2 weeks. College football has been the biggest moneymaker, and while regression is likely, I'm hoping regression still means profit. I will say this, that I'm not going to hit 65 to 70% against the spread over the long term. It's just not going to happen. I'm being very transparent here. So the past 2 weeks is probably as good as it gets. I will say that the best time of the year for me, when I make most of my money in college football and pro football, is late November and into December during bowl season. So again, congrats to all my clients that took advantage of the 2-week package that was going on the last 2 weeks. For $109, you got 2 weeks of access, guaranteed or your money back. And I hope you guys followed every single play, because a $10,000 bankroll player just made $5,600. So it's been a really good 2-week run, and we look to continue it. Again, it's short-term sample. I say the same thing when we lose. But overall, long-term goal is to make profit over the long term, and that's what we've done over a 12-year history of doing this. So going to continue back to the grind. And if you're interested in getting all my premium picks for the first time, if you guys are new listeners or you just have listened and never really gotten my picks, you can get them for free. All you have to do is write a review for this podcast on iTunes, screenshot it, and send it over to me, and I'll give you access for a week for free. So make sure you check that out. We appreciate you guys listening, appreciate your support. Also, I appreciate the thumbs up on YouTube if you can. I'm trying to grow the video podcast of this. It's going to be a slow grind compared to our audio podcast, which has been going strong for, I think, 8 years now. So please do anything you can to help so I can continue putting these out. The leans on my last podcast 2 weeks ago, I think, went 6-2. We'll have quite a few leans for you on today's show. 9 total leans. So in one play, I can tell you right now that there's a 90% chance I'm playing it, giving it out to clients, meaning I'm putting my own money on it. Otherwise, these are just leans until I can dig further. So we'll start with what we always start with. We'll back out. Check out last week's games, box scores, and tell you where I thought, really just going over some of the key games and where we are moving forward. So Cincinnati, obviously in the hunt for the college football playoff. They outgained South Florida last week, and they won the game, but they've had some issues covering the spreads of late. Been in some close games. It feels like the pressure is building. Part of the reason lately is that they've become a turnover machine. They have 6 turnovers in their last 2 games. I think that's kind of a red flag. Luckily, they've also forced 6 turnovers, or we would have, probably seen an upset. This week, they'll host SMU with obviously a ton of pressure as an 11-point favorite at home. The good thing for Cincinnati is Notre Dame keeps winning. Notre Dame is 9-1. And obviously Cincinnati upset them at their own stadium. So that's good news for Cincinnati, sitting on the brink of a college football playoff spot. They really obviously need some help here. They really can't afford Ohio State and Oregon to run the table, although I think that, and I'm hoping that they do. But back to this game, SMU impressed me last week against UCF in what was one of my only losses on the card. SMU very strong in the run defense, but they've not been able to force turnovers on the season, ranking 104th in defensive possessions ending in turnovers. So the question is, can Cincinnati clean up the turnovers? And if they do, I think Cincinnati can cover the spread here. No play, no lean for me, because I'm looking for an opportunity to fade Cincinnati at some point. Although right now it's probably a buy low spot. And then for SMU, we've faded them the last 2 weeks. So as of right now, no official lean, no play there. Georgia, our free pick winner last week, and you can get those alerts by heading on over to freddiewills.com. logging in with your Google account, your Twitter account, your Facebook account, an email, whatever, and then just setting up your profile to get alerts on my free picks. Or you can just look them on the website. Do one free pick per week. And last week was Georgia -20, a cover. Just so you guys know, I am 75-59 over my last 134 college football free picks for a 10.3% return on investment, and 60-40 over my last 100 NFL free picks for 29% return on investment. So over the long term, our free picks that we've been giving out to clients have been winners. We give out one per week per sport typically. So make sure you get those alerts. You can get them by text message or by email by setting up your profile at freddywills.com. So Georgia, they only outgained Tennessee by 100 yards, and typically I would say that was a misleading final. But this is what happens when you play super fast like Tennessee does against a team that has more talent than you. I always don't think it's a good idea to play faster when you're going against a team with more talent. In a way, I mean, obviously I know that's how Tennessee's offense is built, but you're just giving the team that has more talent more opportunity to win and cover the spread, and that was in my handicap. If you want to go and read it at freddywills.com/records, all my plays and records released at kickoff and always there for you to look. You can look 5 years from now, that play's still going to be there with my written up analysis. Tennessee was minus in turnover margin and 3 for 5 on fourth down. I'm still not a crazy believer in Georgia, to be honest. I know that sounds crazy because they are heavily favored to win the national championship. In reality, they have not been tested. The SEC East is very weak, and maybe it's because I can't get out of my brain their opening game of the season against Clemson, where they won 10-3 because of a pick six. I just can't get that game out, and I'm not. Stetson Bennett's great quarterback. Is he a game changer? I don't know. I think teams can prepare for him. He's extremely mobile, but I don't think he's the greatest quarterback. I can't believe they didn't go back to JT Daniels. They may before the season's out. I'm going to be looking to face Georgia at some point. I can't tell you that I'm definitely going to be fading them in the SEC championship game because they'll be favorites. But, I don't know. I think I could see them maybe not putting together their full game plan unless they want to kick Alabama out and not have to face them if there's an opportunity for them to get out of the college football playoff. All in all, Georgia doesn't face anyone this week. They get an FCS foe. Meanwhile, Tennessee will host South Alabama with Vanderbilt on deck, and they'll be a 28-point favorite. Going by how South Alabama looked against App State, I would lean towards Tennessee minus 28 because they could have and should have covered against App State and couldn't. Now they're going up against Tennessee, who's going to play super fast. Just seems like a beatable spread for Tennessee. So I would lean towards Tennessee. I actually, I'm not going to call it a lean. I'm just saying that if you're going to look one way, that's the way to look because of how fast Tennessee plays. And they're playing a team that they obviously have more talent than. But it's a total flat spot for Tennessee coming off the Georgia game. So it's really a pass for me. I won't play South Alabama either because they had a very misleading final. This is what happened last week against App State. South Alabama, 21.5-point dog. They lost 31-17. Didn't cover the spread. So, it was 14-7 at the half, and they were covering late, down 24-7 on the goal line before they threw a pick six. They also had numerous opportunities in the green and red zone, and App State held them to 3 for 16 on third down and 2 for 5 on fourth down. Sometimes, you have to take the points. I'm all for analytics. In fact, I use them to handicap a lot of the games, but that's not all I use. And I'm not criticizing coaches here because I think there's just such a pressure to be going for it on fourth down. If you don't, you're an idiot because you're not following the analytics. In my opinion, it's not always likely to convert, especially if you have a shit offense and you're going against a really good defense in what should be a low-scoring game. Like this game was, a low-scoring game. It was 14-7 at the half. had South Alabama gone for 3 field goals, this game would have totally changed. App State would have played completely different as well. Now maybe they have more likely chance of winning by going for it and assuming that they're going to convert, 50% of those. But when you have a shit offense and you're going against a really good defense, I don't think it's 50-50. It's a lot less than 50-50. And I feel like that's not being factored in where teams are just going for it on fourth down. I like finding those teams that don't actually do that. I think it's more predictable to predict the outcome of a game. And honestly, that's why I stopped doing teasers in college football, because everyone's just going for it on fourth down. And there's just the market's a lot volatile. You don't know. These games aren't close because of that fourth down situation. Oregon wins 38-24 over Washington State, and I was really impressed with Oregon because it was a spot where they could have struggled. It was really a flat spot the week before Utah, and while the spread was a push, I leaned Oregon. I unfortunately wasn't ever able to get it at 13.5, so I didn't play it. I still have them at 25-1, a ticket in my pocket to win the national championship. Obviously, looking for an opportunity to hedge at some point. This team has one of the best offensive line in the league, a very good running back, an elite wide receiver, and, Anthony Brown is the weakness. He's holding them back. So obviously I'm looking to hedge at some point. But this week, Oregon stepped up every time this season. They had a big game at Ohio State without their best defensive player and won. A big game at UCLA and won. Now it's a big game, arguably the game of the year, at Utah. They're a +3 dog. Listen, they get to prove whether they're not they're the number 3 team in the country. A lot of people are saying they're not, and I'm sure the players have definitely heard that, and we'll see what they do. It's time to put up or shut up. So I am leaning towards Oregon this week. Whether I get to the window or not, I already have quite a bit riding on Oregon. And I'll post over on Twitter my ticket at 25-1 if you guys want to check it out, at Freddie Wills. For my Oregon play, I also have money on Ohio State. So looking for minimum one of those 2 teams getting to the college football playoff with an opportunity to hedge. I got Ohio State at +700. They're now +400. Oklahoma versus Baylor. I'm kicking myself for not backing Baylor after stating multiple times in previous weeks how I thought Oklahoma was going to be in trouble offensively, going up against a good defense, and it clearly happened in this game. I did play the under in the first half in this game, and it cashed with ease. It was 7-7 at the half. Baylor flat out dominated, and they'll head out on the road with plenty of confidence to face Kansas State in what is, a key game, as Kansas State can win. And they'll have the tiebreaker over Baylor. However, they lost to Oklahoma in Oklahoma State, so it wouldn't really matter if they win this game. They still would need Oklahoma State, I think, to lose out, and it's not. I don't think it's necessarily possible with Oklahoma playing Oklahoma State. I think there's a slight chance for Kansas State to get in the Big 12 championship game, but not likely. Baylor still has a shot to get into the Big 12 championship game, and that's why they're favored here by a point. Kansas State, I think, plays spoiler. I'm leaning Kansas State in this game. For Oklahoma, they'll host Iowa State, who has had probably the most disappointing season of any team filled with the Big 12 championship aspirations. They will need to win this game and look for a ton of help as well. They would have the tiebreaker with both Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So a win here, and they could get in because Oklahoma State plays each other next week. I think they would need Oklahoma State to beat Oklahoma. I'm not sure. I have to look at those standings again. I know it gets a little crazy with all the parity going around college football. I love it. We never see that. We never see parity in college football. It's great for the sport. I'm very excited to see what happens down the stretch. But for this Oklahoma game with Iowa State, I actually lean again towards the under in the first half, 30.5. Listen, you can go look up my write-up against Baylor last week when I wrote that up. It's pretty similar handicap. Oklahoma's offense is just they're just not the same as previous years. And at one point in the game against Baylor, they actually benched the true freshman Caleb Williams. So, I mean, at least they're back at home here, but his confidence has to be shaken a little bit. And Spencer Rattler didn't look good when he came in, so I don't think that part matters. Notre Dame, 9-1 now. They crushed Virginia 28-3, but Virginia was playing without Brennan Armstrong at quarterback. I feel like Notre Dame has gotten a lot of fortunate matchups this year. Maybe I'm wrong, but with backup quarterbacks or teams with lots of injuries, still they could easily be sitting at 10-0. I'm thankful that Cincinnati is a team that beat them because they're not getting in over Cincinnati unless Cincinnati loses, I think, twice. But since he's still outside looking in, I just don't want to see Notre Dame again in the college football playoff. We'll see what happens. Notre Dame faces Georgia Tech at home. Georgia Tech has the capability of pulling an upset, in my opinion. I mean, they did beat North Carolina handily, and North Carolina was in the game at Notre Dame recently. Georgia Tech, at one point in the season, their numbers don't look great now. I have to dig into why, but at one point their defense was very good against the run, and that's the first thing you have to do against Notre Dame. So, and Notre Dame probably not looking ahead of Stanford. I think that Notre Dame is playing with a chip on their shoulder. And Georgia Tech has Georgia on deck, so really probably not getting involved in that game at all, because I do think Notre Dame has a chip on their shoulder, and Georgia Tech really probably looking towards Georgia on deck. That's a bigger game for them than this Notre Dame game. Oklahoma State sending a message. I mean, I had TCU this week. They crushed TCU 63-17. They really didn't let the foot off the throat of TCU here. This was just a week after TCU beat Baylor, so very impressive by Oklahoma State. It was one of those games where all the players got up for 1 week where TCU beat Baylor, and because their head coach was fired, and they really obviously could not bring it for another week. TCU is just very bad, 2 for 13 on third down, 0 for 1 on fourth down. They did move the ball early, and then once they got down big, they just kind of gave up, it seemed. They'll be huge favorites this week against Kansas in what would be ultimately the biggest buy low, sell high situation as Kansas upset Texas. We'll talk about that later in this podcast. Oklahoma State, meanwhile, goes on the road to face Texas Tech, who just won in dramatic fashion, 62-yard field goal over Iowa State. I would have leaned towards Texas Tech this week at plus 10.5, but they're just off that major upset. And the reason, Oklahoma State has Oklahoma on deck, so I still may look at that game, but somehow I just don't see Texas Tech beating Oklahoma State at this point. I did put a little money this week on just because of their path, and I think Oklahoma is very beatable. Now they may have to beat them twice, but they may not. There's an opportunity where Oklahoma State if Iowa State beats Oklahoma and then Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, I think Iowa State's in. So we get a rematch of Oklahoma State versus Iowa State or Oklahoma State versus Baylor, depending on how it finishes out. So I put some money on, only $100, but 100 to 1 for Oklahoma State to win the national championship. Wake Forest outgained NC State by 80 yards, but the difference was third downs and penalties. NC State 119 yards to 50 yards in penalties for Wake Forest. NC State 3 for 14 on third down, while Wake was 10 for 19. Wake Forest this week's 4.5-point dog at Clemson. This seems like a fishy line to me. I don't feel like Clemson has any business being a favorite, even at home against a really solid Wake Forest team. I get Wake Forest hasn't played many defenses until last week, but they put up 45 points. This is probably going to be Sam Hartman's Heisman Trophy opportunity to have a moment in this game against a perennially dominant Clemson team that isn't as dominant this year, but their defense still is. So a lot of people will respect if he goes out and puts up 40 points or just is in a battle and has like a really good game statistically. So I do lean towards Wake Forest. I feel like they just got it done against the top defense. Clemson obviously covering a couple games in a row, but I can't really respect it the way they covered against Florida State with the fumble late that just kind of ended up in the end zone on pitchbacks, and then beating UConn My home state, that doesn't really say much. So I don't know what to think of Clemson here. I don't know why they're a 4.5 point favorite. I got to dig deeper, but definitely lean towards Wake Forest. Obviously, Clemson still can get into the ACC championship. They need NC State to lose again and win this game, so maybe that's why they're favored, because it's probably their most important game left on the schedule. But it's not like Wake Forest doesn't want to get into the ACC championship game, leading that division. So this is going to be an interesting game. And obviously, Wake Forest can lose it still, I think. Well, no, they can't, because then they would be tied with Clemson. So they can't afford to lose it. Ole Miss dominated their game against Texas A&M. I think it was misleading. They win 29-19, but they really dominated that game. They were not able to score in the green zone. Ole Miss had over 400 yards in the first half and just had a 15-0 lead. This was a premium play for me. I gave out Ole Miss +3, so I was happy to see it come through, especially after A&M dominated the third quarter. I was getting a little nervous. Ole Miss gets Vanderbilt this week, and I'm sure it's going to be all about padding Matt Corral's stats to help him win the Heisman. Teams and coaches say they don't care. If there's one coach that probably cares about a player getting the Heisman, I would think that it's Lane Kiffin. I don't really like to play big favorites, but I definitely lean Ole Miss -36.5. It's a night game at home. I definitely would lean first half minus, the -20 or whatever the line sets up to be. We backed Ole Miss last week, and I'm not as high on Texas A&M as others. I still thought that they were getting too much credit for their win over Alabama, and after the game, I think I proved I was right. I also heard rumors of Jimbo Fisher possibly heading to LSU to take the head coach job, so we'll see. I don't know how serious that is. It would be a very shocking move. Auburn loses 43-34 against Mississippi State after they blew a 28-3 lead. What a collapse. After losing the previous week, Auburn now back-to-back losses. It's clearly a misleading final. Auburn was outgained by only 4 yards, but they had costly turnover. I didn't watch a ton of this game, but looking at the box score, I can't really figure out what happened in the second half or how they blew this lead. It seemed like the special teams was a big issue, and Mississippi State had a lot of short fields. Auburn, unfortunately, is clearly in a flat spot this week, or maybe they're angry and need a win. They got Alabama in the Iron Bowl next week, and they get South Carolina this week. They're a 7.5-point road favorite. Open up as 10.5. No opinion here. I'm not really looking to back Auburn as a favorite of any such, so passing. And obviously we backed South Carolina a few times this week successfully until this past week where they lost 31-28 to Missouri. Here's a nice one to talk about. Florida Gators. Wow. 52 points they give up to Samford. It was all over social media. This was the week after Florida fired their defensive coordinator, so it is still shocking, but you expect maybe a bump from the players, but maybe the players didn't actually like it. Florida's offense scores 70, so they're lucky for that reason. I feel like the entire world is going to overreact down the stretch. Dan Mullen really needs to bring it back. Let's just take a deep breath, take it back, bring it back to basics this week. They lost 3 in a row. They just embarrassed in a win, 70-52. And now, playing an FCS foe, giving up 52 points. They didn't lose, but everybody's going to look at that game and be like, Florida's absolute trash. And they've looked trash. But this is a great buy low situation. You guys know I love those spots. It's been profitable. That's the reason why we're seeing Florida opened as -7.5, out to -9 against Missouri. They do have Florida State up next, but they're sitting at 5 wins. So I think the Missouri game is an easier game than the Florida State game. I expect that they'll bounce back against Missouri. I hate that this game's on the road, but I really think that they can control this game against Missouri. The defense that was embarrassed a week ago should step up here, and I lean towards Florida -9. Speaking of stepping up, Washington, which we did give out, stepped up, especially early, holding us, 17-7 and 24-14 lead late. I gave out +6 on Washington to clients, and I thought it was going to be a bad beat, holding a 24-14 lead with 6 minutes left. You feel really good about the game. You feel like you're at worst, these are the things that go through my head. At worst, Washington gives up 2 touchdowns, they lose the game, but we still cover the spread because they only lose by 4. Arizona proceeds to score 3 touchdowns, including a pick 6 with 32 seconds left to go up 35-24. I go, well, it's a bad beat. And I bitched on Twitter saying that I'm never on the side of those things, which feels true. I feel like maybe it's just natural to remember our bad luck than to remember our good luck. But I certainly will remember this one. Washington goes right down the field with 30 seconds left, scores a touchdown, we cover. They actually recovered the onside kick, and we're going to have a shot to win the game. Very emotional, but you have to handle it the right way. If you're going to watch the games you put money on, you must never, obviously bet more than you can afford to lose. And, you just have to enjoy the game. If you lose and don't cover the spread, it sucks when you lose games or if you lose a bunch of games. But, that's betting. There's highs and lows. It's a roller coaster. It's a grind. As long as you're staying disciplined with money management, like I do, like I recommend to all my clients, you should be good. It's when you start gambling, betting too many games, chasing, that's when you lose money gambling. And most people don't have the discipline. I would say 95% of people just don't have the discipline in sports betting. I have friends who know I do this and talk to me about this, and they still don't have discipline. It's just crazy to me. Anyways, Washington, I thought they were going to get a bump because they fired some offensive coordinators and coaches. They suspend head coach Jimmy Lake, and we've seen it all year long with teams stepping up in those situations where there's turmoil in their coaching room. We saw it with USC. We saw it with Washington State. We saw it with, really even LSU stepped up a couple games of late. I know Big Ed is still there, and there's another team. I can't think of it offhand that fired TCU. We saw it with TCU last week when they upset Baylor in their first game after the coaching. Well, now Jimmy Lake is out as coach, but this is going to be their second game, and they're going on the road. They opened up as a 5.5-point favorite and moved out to 7 at some places against Colorado. Washington may also be looking ahead to Washington State. On the other hand, they're 4-6, and if they went out, they could get to a bowl game. But the question is, do they even want to go to a bowl game? Does this coaching staff want to hang around knowing that they're ultimately not going to be here next year? So I would say no, they don't want to go to a bowl game. No, the coaches, they're going to show that they care, but they're not going to be putting in max effort. I'm going to wait to see if this gets to 7.5, and I would lean towards Colorado at home. A couple more games here. 2 to be exact. Kansas upset Texas 57-56 in OT thanks to 4 Texas turnovers. In all honesty, I have to admire how Texas came back in this one because they were down 42-21. They came all the way back to force overtime. Teams tend to bounce back after embarrassing performances like this. We've seen it time and time again. This clearly falls into that bucket. Texas now 4-6, in danger of not going to a bowl game, which would be a colossal failure for Sark in his first year. They go on the road to face West Virginia. And it's crazy that Texas was ranked. I don't know what their highest ranking of this year, but I'm pretty sure they were in the top 15 at one point. Maybe before that Arkansas game where we had a huge bet on Arkansas. It was a play of the day, and they easily won and covered. This week they go on the road to face West Virginia plus 3 as a dog. I actually lean Texas. Again, these teams, they're in turmoil now, 4-6. They need to win, and they could easily win out and get to a bowl game. But it starts here this week against a beatable West Virginia team. I think that they just have to play clean ball, and that's a big question mark. Whether I get to the window with Texas or not, I don't know. But I probably won't even take plus 3 if I bet it. I'd probably just take Texas on the money line. Last game, we're heading back out to the Mountain West. Utah State pummels San Jose State, holds them under 200 yards. They're in the driver's seat for the Mountain West division to get to the conference championship game ahead of Air Force and Boise State. They obviously lost to Boise State, but They did beat Air Force, so they have the tiebreaker if they lose another game here. They really have a game lead. They can't lose to Wyoming here at home. They'll be a 5-point favorite. Win this game, and they're going to the championship game, I think. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. My podcast wraps up today's podcast. Again, another thing I didn't mention, subscribe to my Premium Pick newsletter. You'll get a premium play each week that clients pay for. So that's aside from my free picks that I give out that have been 55 to 60% in NFL and college over the long term. So today's podcast leans that I talked about: Oregon +3, Oklahoma, Iowa State first half under, Kansas State +1, Wake Forest +4.5, Ole Miss -36.5, and the minus whatever it is for the first half. Florida -9, Colorado +7.5, Texas +3. So hope you guys enjoy some winners, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Probably do a podcast early in the week since it's Thanksgiving. Gonna be a lot going on. I'm also going to be on another podcast next week, so I'll let you guys know about that more on my podcast when I do it on Monday. All right, take care and good luck this week.